Welcome to Making Our Way Forward, a podcast where we share compelling life stories and learn from the experience of everyday entrepreneurs. At NACCE, we celebrate diversity and invite you to join the conversation as we talk to entrepreneurs and leaders from all walks of life. We hope that by telling their stories, we bring you inspiration, empower you to take action, and ignite entrepreneurship in your community. Welcome to Making Our Way Forward podcast. We have a great guest today, somebody who has been a good friend to the NACCE network and has a really interesting background. She also got some very good news last week. So it's my pleasure to welcome Misty to the program. Misty, why don't you introduce yourself and talk and begin by talking a bit about your background and what you're doing now in your career.
Definitely. So yes, thanks for having me. Very excited to be here today. So as mentioned, Misty Fox, I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship and Small Business at the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University. And I realize it's an absurdly long academic type title because we love long titles, but in reality, what I do is I oversee a group of 11 programs, and that's how we got to partner with NACCE that really meet veteran entrepreneurs where they're at on their journey. And that's that entrepreneurial journey, whether it's ideation, startup, or growth. Now, that said, I now have been at IVMF for close to 6 years. January will mark the next anniversary. And before that, I was at Oklahoma State University doing much of the same thing. So building out programs for a newly dedicated center down there. We worked a lot with rural women, veterans, and it was when I was working with veterans that I really just kind of fell in love with the whole entrepreneurial idea. So that's when I got to have the offer to come up here to Syracuse, and the rest is history, so to speak. And then we got some awesome news last week. So the Institute has been delivering entrepreneurship programming for 14 years, since 2007. And last week we were notified that we are one of 8 Tier 1 recipients for the Community Navigator Grant through the Small Business Administration. And to say that we are excited would be an understatement. So I think it's one of these amazing opportunities that everyone always talks about. How do we get people working together? How do we really encourage connectivity in the ecosystem? And how do we get people to their first best use, right? And all of a sudden, here's this opportunity in this grant, and we are the veteran representative, and we're the one group that has been, chosen to help coordinate that for veterans. And how huge! So we're extremely excited.
That is huge, and I know just getting to know a little bit of the SBA leadership, Administrator Guzman, and so many good people there. Mark Madrid. They sort of came up with this concept that I believe, if I understand the history correctly, came from President Biden, and in terms of navigation, of meeting people where they are, understanding their needs, and how do you get this wealth of resources to them. And so when you mentioned, Misty, about the veteran population and how near and dear that is to your heart, that's something that we have in common. When I was in New Jersey working for a community college, I had the opportunity to be a joint base honorary commander for a period of years. And I loved that experience because it was really that opportunity to sort of welcome in people that really dedicate their lives to keeping us all safe. So yeah. I would love for you to talk about what makes veterans, good candidates to be entrepreneurs. What are some examples of successes that you've seen, and share a little bit about that whole kind of segment that people might not know about.
I mean, I think first and foremost, a lot of these companies are your everyday companies that you think of all the time. So Walmart, Enterprise, GoDaddy, Nike. I mean, those are all veteran-owned businesses. And I think a lot of folks sit there and say, well, what is it about a veteran? We know that 50% of veterans started businesses after World War II, which is huge. But I think if you really think about it, never in the history of military service has someone walked up to someone who is serving and said, I have this project for you, and I'm going to give you all the information you need, and I'm going to give you all the time you need to execute. I'm going to make sure you have as big a budget as you need and the people that you need. That doesn't happen. So the military's constantly, challenged to say, how do I create a solution with as little resources, time, money, people, anything that I can to make sure that it's successful. And it's that sort of adaptive mindset that I then think translates well over into entrepreneurship. So folks think that entrepreneurs are these wild risk takers. And if you take a survey of, people who aren't entrepreneurs, they're always going to tell you that entrepreneurs are very risky. When in fact, if you ask entrepreneurs, they're not risky. It's calculated risk. And so these are things that just overlap extremely well between the military and entrepreneurship. And you see some amazing successes. But I think the cool thing about small business and military connected small business more specifically is that if you look at motivations, so the top 5 motivations for civilians and the top 5 motivation for veterans often overlap, except for number 5. And number 5 is often veterans start businesses to serve their communities and to serve the folks in which they're, surrounded by. And I think it's that continuous selfless service that also really sets veterans up well. They pay more than their civilian counterparts. They make more than their civilian counterparts in their small businesses. There's all this success. But then to your point about navigation, 45% of veteran small business owners said, I had issues navigating my community. And look, I think that's why this community navigator and just that encouragement to say, let's not proliferate more small business supports. Let's make sure that folks are getting to the right service in the least amount of time, and that service is being put to their first best use, and they're doing exactly what they've been made to do. And I think that's the exciting part of working together. And I think that's why I love this partnership too.
I think you're right. And as I'm listening to you, there's so much rich kind of wisdom there. But really, in the entrepreneurship world, we talk about the customer experience and customer discovery. And I think you're right. When you come to something with a heart for service, you take smaller bets, but you see it behind me on the screen behind me. I have a graphic of the effectuation model that was put forth by Dr. Sarah Saraswati, and we talk about affordable loss. And I think what you said is perfect because you're not going to bet everything that you have on an idea, right? What you're going to do is you're going to look at your bird in hand opportunities. You're going to collaborate and be inclusive and welcoming of others, learning from your mistakes, but also evaluating loss. And I think, I didn't know those corporations that you mentioned earlier were started and run by veterans, but in some respects, it makes perfect sense to me. And I had the opportunity to start to learn a little bit more about IVMF and to kind of learn more about your work when I was at Hillsborough Community College at the InLab. And some of our dear joint friends, Professor Andy Gold and Beth Curley, invited me down a couple of years ago before the pandemic where there was a Strive open house. And it was just the coolest thing. You had, veterans, you had little kids sitting in the back, you had moms and dads. I mean, it literally was standing room only. And not only did they get there early, but they stayed there late. And I saw them really reaching out to each other and saying, I'm starting this type of business. What are you doing? Maybe we can help one another. Is that kind of the spirit that
I think, yeah, like that's what I think, we talk about putting together programs all the time, and we put together some amazing curriculum and things like that. But at the end of the day, the magic, I think, and the thing that we all talk about is that connection that gets made. I mean, quite frankly, military service is one of the largest alumni academies of the world, if you think about it in that regard. So, often folks will come through and say, like I went to Oklahoma State University, so I don't hesitate to reach out to another OSU person if I need something. Now, if I have that shared experience of military service, think about that as an alumni group. And I think that that's what you see is they come together and all of a sudden there's this shared experience. There's this kind of battle buddy. There's, 30 other people in your cohort who are ready to give you advice, to cheer you on, to talk you off the ledge, to just do everything that you need to do as an entrepreneur and support you as you move forward. And I think very often at these programs, for some folks, it's the first time that they've been back around that brotherhood. And so I think that in and of itself is empowering. And I think that that's why when we had the opportunity to partner with HCC at this, community college level, and it was really within the fabric of communities. It wasn't a program that is just doing, 2-day learning and then we're out. It's, a program where 6 months from now, when that veteran in, Tampa needs that support, they have it, and they have that built-in family right there in their backyard, and they have, that no wrong door, and they now know that their community is there to support them. And that's a huge stat that we saw in our national survey of military affiliated entrepreneurs, is that many times veterans don't feel supported by their community. So this is a way that you can build that community support. But you do see that just natural ability to connect, and that natural ability to then just be excited. And I think as we walk out of these programs where you've put blood, sweat, tears, and hundreds of hours into making sure that they go smoothly, and you see that right there, that's amazing. And we've seen some other big partnerships come out of it, more than just friendships. We've seen, there was two folks that met at NEBVA and then later solidified their relationship at Edge, who won a $23 million contract together, and then now this year just realized that they got the phase 2 for another 24 million. That's life-changing revenue. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, it's so exciting, Misty. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about, alumni associations. And one of the experiences that I had was doing my doctoral work at Wilmington University in Delaware. So Wilmington, as you know, it was, the history of it was the end of the Underground Railroad. So there's a very high population of African-American people. And in my cohort of a little more than a dozen people, 2 were retired colonels, one an African-American woman who ran unsuccessfully, I might sadly disclose, in Delaware, but she is not giving up, and another person who works in the healthcare industry. And I think that experience of being somewhat a minority in a group, but being around all these amazing leaders, both veterans and non-veterans, really kind of, and I didn't think about this until years later, sort of really got me to better understand how inclusive and really how accepting the military is of different people, different beliefs, different lifestyles. And I don't think that the everyday public person understands that.
The often the idea is that if I go to hire or work with a veteran, that they're typically less educated and that it's not as diverse, when in reality, the military is actually more diverse than civilian life. And to your point, that just background of people are coming from all over rural America, big city America, folks that have a history of academy grads versus folks that are, going into the military to see the world, right? And then a lot of folks think, well, people are going into the military because they're just trying to get an education. They don't have an education, they have no way to access it. When in reality, veterans are typically more educated than their civilian counterparts. So if you really look at this, you're getting an amazingly educated and diverse background, an individual that has now seen the world and had those experiences. And I think when you start to put all of that together, it's another reason that entrepreneurship also makes sense, because you can put yourself in that customer's shoes, because you've lived more of a diverse life, or of a life that has just so many other kind of inputs into it. And so I think that that's a really important note to point out there, is that, as you look at folks that are going into politics, we have a Veterans in Politics program here to encourage that civic engagement for the military connected individuals. And then we also have a great onward opportunity that gives them free credentials, your PMP, et cetera, for free through that program, because quite frankly, there's a business case for most organizations to do business or to hire veteran-owned companies or military-connected individuals. And I think that that's something that's often lost on folks, but it actually does make a lot of sense. You can do really well and do a lot of good too.
Yeah, and sometimes I know it's a translation of services. Before I joined NACCE 7 years ago, I was a vice president at a community college, and one of the areas I oversaw was career services. And one of the things that we would do a lot, because we had in New Jersey a large veteran population, is work with people on their resumes, because sometimes, the way that we sort of market and brand our skills, if you're an infantry, person, maybe that doesn't translate necessarily, but a lot of that attention to detail, the commitment, the teamwork, all of those things are really important to employers. And to your point, not only working for someone else, but if you decide that you want to start your own business, one business I thought was really interesting in New Jersey was Parts Life, where they would go and they would reclaim military equipment, and then they
Yeah.
would repurpose it. And so they learned about, contracts and things like that, and finding sort of the niche in the market. So whether it's a small business or a very, growing business like you're talking about, it's really about opportunity, and it's kind of opening people's, eyes and minds to this. One thing I do want to get into, Misty, too, is one of the things that you have done over the last couple of years is really open up beyond universities and really embrace community colleges into the mix. And I think it started with Hillsborough Community College and the partnership that you formed there. But maybe you could speak a little bit about, kind of what your perspective is of community colleges, and as you run 11 different programs, but kind of what you would like to see on the community college front for veterans.
I think that what really opened my eyes is I'm a very data-driven person. I adore stats and things like that to really carve out how we deliver programs. And I think that having that decision level data is absolutely something that's just a requirement. And I think what I saw coming through was, and I mentioned it earlier, but veterans didn't feel supported by their communities. They didn't understand how to navigate some of the resources that were in the communities. And they were also calling for some of those resources to be better, quite frankly. And so what we really then started to look at was, well, then how do we help affect, or how do we help connect that community for veterans? And how do we get someone that's on the ground, a champion for it? And I think, as you mentioned earlier, meeting Andy Gold, meeting Beth, they were immediately those folks that were not only ready for the challenge, but were looking for ways to do it better. They've been delivering entrepreneurship programs specifically for veterans for years. We're not their first rodeo, so to speak, but they were challenging themselves to say, okay, so we're doing really, really good work, really good work. How can we do just even better, just a little bit better? And it's that type of person that you're like, well, we have to figure out how to partner then, because you're in it. Like if we put the veteran in the center of all that we do, we're going to head in the right direction. And when you get like-minded people that are saying, I want to chase excellence just as hard, I just need to put the right people together in a team, then it just made sense to say, okay, well, let's team and let's go. And what I think you're looking for there is exactly what's being accomplished. You want someone with that open door policy that knows what they do really well, but also knows what they need to have in terms of an arsenal brought in. Like, what are those other tools I need in my toolbox, in my tool shed, to make sure that I can go further faster? And that takes a no ego approach. That takes this is what I do, but this is what I need help with, and this is how we can keep changing. And it takes that kind of agnostic level towards programming to say, is this working exactly the way it needs to, or do I need to iterate? And I think what I see on community colleges that you often don't see other places is that they're willing to partner with anyone. So they'll partner with other aspects of their school. They'll partner with the SPDC that might be on campus, or it might not. They'll partner with SCORE and just anyone else to make sure that they can deliver in a way that is, very, very, very effective. And I think that that's really what I love to see. And what I would say that community colleges have the advantage of is that they're right there in those communities. And more so than a lot of, sometimes universities that can feel a little insular, right? They're their own little cities within cities. Typically, it almost feels like community colleges have that. They can feel kind of the breadth of what's going on in the world around them. They have, adult learners that are coming in to, just sharpen their skills a little bit. And they have that ability to just help people move to the next thing. And I think then what you see now is a trust that's being built with some of these veterans. Some of them are now matriculating and going into school because they realize this isn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. Now I can go back and get the credentials that I need to move forward. And I think that that's what I like about this community college. I also just love the fact that, NACCE's there as this backbone. So as you start to talk to these schools, a lot of them know each other because they know of this beautiful community of practice that's been set up for them to do better work. And I think when you have that built-in association where folks can then share that best practice and challenge each other, you're going to work better. I mean, we saw it with the Coalition of Veteran-Owned Business. Fortune 500 companies started challenging each other to better payment terms, to more business with veterans. and people take it seriously. So I think that that's the same thing here, that you'll see a little friendly competition kind of roll out, and those schools really challenge each other to do excellent work, even more excellently, which is now a new word.
And I think celebration, one of the things that I loved about NACCE from the moment I found out about it when I was a college employee is really, it's not only celebrating success, but when things don't work out, full
Right.
disclosure, and this, NACCE applied for a Navigator grant and we weren't successful. And what we learned through the application process was so important. We put forward what we thought was a really strong application, but we learned how to better work together as a team. We learned how to collect data. And then when the results came out and it was Syracuse got the award, we were truly happy for you. And seeing that kind of a spirit, I know in past work that I've done, I didn't feel that. And that happens in a lot of different ways. Sometimes we have pitch competitions and we have multiple colleges that are pitching against each other. Well, they can't all win.
Right.
But what I see is them celebrating those that do win, because in a way, just by virtue of the fact that you put yourself out there and you try, you are a winner, because you're saying, I am stepping up, I am going to support and help any way possible. And Misty, I can't think of a better example, especially as we celebrate Veterans Day. And I'm just so excited that we have this episode to share around the world. I may have shared with you earlier, we're now in over 425 American cities and 31 countries around the world. So we have people that are interested in the experiences that you share, and the fact that you're willing to go big and go bold and wrap your arms around community colleges is just a delight for us. So I think as our time draws to a close, thinking about Veterans Day and what that means to people, I would love for you to share maybe what you're going to be thinking about and ways that you, as a person and as a professional, are really going to celebrate the day.
I think for me, as I, look back and reflect, you have to think about, these are people that, we have an all volunteer force. So these are people that, especially in the last 20 years, have raised their hand realizing that they're going to deploy, and raise their hand realizing that, it's a lot more now to say that I will defend this country and what it stands for. And I think, as a measure of national security, it is all the more important to make sure that as veterans and their families transition back into civilian lives, that their world is better because of their service. And for me, it's about connecting. So as I look at what I'm excited about in the year going forward, is that reconnecting. We saw it at Edge, where we had our first in-person program. The number of times people just came up and said, thank you for hosting this. And it wasn't because they had a great breakout, but it's because for the first time in 18 months, they were around 400 other people with a shared experience. And I think that I would challenge anyone in the, civilian or any other world to say, who is a group that I can sort of lift up? So if it's during Veterans Day, we have a great shop veteran list. And do I mean I'll go spend all your money? No, because that's not necessarily reality. But pick a company that you see doing great work. Steezy Socks, veteran-owned business. Every time you buy a sock, a homeless veteran gets a pair of socks. So make sure that you talk about it. Just share it on Facebook or Instagram. Just saying, I heard of this great company doesn't mean that you need to purchase, but it means that you've now supported in a way, or have, an open ear to someone that wants to talk about their experience or their business, or do customer discovery, or just, have that conversation about life. Because I think what's so important and what I'm so excited about is that people are excited to reconnect right now. And so do it. And then people are really excited to support small businesses right now. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to go spend all your money, but you can just post about it and give them that support. And it'll make you feel better. It'll really help small businesses as we go into the holidays. So make sure to check out all those small business shopping lists and purchase from Main Street America, so that you can then kind of help the communities that you live in. And I think that as we, look forward, that's what we're excited most about, is connecting. So connecting with our partners, HCC, NACCE, and everyone else, to do a better ecosystem for small businesses. And I think 2022 is going to be better because of that, and because of the work that we're all doing now. So I'm excited to reconnect with everyone. I'm excited that everyone's going to really kind of focus on small business and shopping small this year, and making sure to check out all those lists. And I'm just really excited about what these kind of new opportunities that we're just now realizing and what it's going to look like in action moving forward.
Right, because small things make just big differences.
Huge waves.
So as we look to 2022 NACCE, we're going to be in Boston for our 20th anniversary celebration, October 2nd through the 5th. And I would love to publicly invite you to be a keynote
I'm there.
Because you can't say it's too far away, because I think you can get there via the train. But I think one of the things that we want to do on the 20th anniversary is celebrate a lot of things, but really the impact in veterans. You'll be almost a year into your SBA Navigator experience. I think people are excited to see the impact that you're having. So I'll follow up with you on that. But I have promised our board and our members around the country, we are going to just knock it out of the park with speakers. And Misty, you would be just a perfect one to speak about what is your passion and what is important to us all. So thank you for being here. Thank everybody who tuned in today, and do something special. Follow Misty Fox's advice. Shop small, shop at veterans-owned businesses. And if you don't know where those are, Google it and find out. Misty, one quick thing before we end. How can people find out more about the work that you do? Maybe give your website address, how people might get in touch with you. Definitely.
It's ivmf.syracuse.edu. So IVMF is Institute for Veterans and Military Families, .syracuse.edu. You can find a shopping guide that has 600 veteran-owned small businesses on it. You can find programs, you can find it, the research, you can find it all on there. But no, we really appreciate it. And thank you so much for this opportunity. Absolutely, short train ride away to Boston. So that look very much forward to that. Congratulations on 20 years. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that listening to this podcast will help you to explore the many ways we might define entrepreneurship. Join us every other Wednesday for more episodes as we celebrate opportunity, learn from one another, and grow together. Subscribe to this podcast, connect with us on social media, and learn more about today's speakers at nacce.com/podcast. We look forward to making our way forward together with you.
Have you heard about our latest book, Impact Ed: How Community College Entrepreneurship Creates Equity and Prosperity? This is our roadmap for building back better in 50 states and globally. In each chapter, we share the inspiring stories of everyday entrepreneurs and explain how community colleges play a crucial role in their success. Visit us at nacce.com/impacted to order your copy now and join us in this work.